All right, I do believe we are live. So, I wanted to talk to you about cancer and a different way of understanding cancer. I have clients that'll come to me with cancer diagnosis, and often they're being treated by other practitioners, whether that's allopathic, whether that's alternative medicine, maybe both. And I always have a degree of education that has to take place for them because there is often a lot of misunderstanding of what exactly is going on inside of their bodies because we have declared cancer to be a war. It is a war on cancer. You've probably heard that over and over again. And that is such a damaging way to frame what is going on inside of your body. If it's a war, then you're having to fight an enemy. And if the enemy is not only in your body, but is your body, then you've declared war on yourself. And how that ever became a slogan, I will never understand because it seems like such an obvious thing. But they've got people thinking with that slogan that something has invaded your body and set up camp, and that thing is called cancer. And that's just not how any of this works. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about cancer and what it is really. Cancer is not an invader, it is not necessarily a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's not a parasite, even though I know many people want to talk about cancer so simplistically as well. It's simply a parasitic infection, and all you need to take is antiparasitics and the cancer will go away. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm not saying parasites don't have something to do with weakening the body, but to say that cancer is just simply a parasitic infection, wow, if it were only that easy, and it's not, and this is the hardest part to grasp, is that this is a multi-variable issue, and this is all about disharmony in your body. That's it. So the question is what caused the disharmony, and what elements are there, what variables are working in a way to create the disharmony, which then eventually, notice what I said there, eventually produces cancer. Because cancer is a miscommunication failure, not an attack. This is your body not communicating properly, okay? Your organs, your nervous system, your immune system is a huge, vast internal network. And cancer happens when this network's communication breaks down. The signals become garbled, distorted, and the checks and balances that keep harmony in the body are no longer present. And your body does what it knows how to do, which is to adapt to the environment. You've probably heard of terrain theory. Well, what is the terrain like inside of your body if it's brain cancer? Is it in the throat? Is it in the abdominal, I'm sorry, the chest cavity, right? And the chest cavity is separated obviously by the border up here of the torso and the diaphragm. So if it's happening in the cavity of the chest, what's the terrain like in that cavity? If it's in the abdominal cavity, what's happening inside the abdominal cavity? So we're looking to see where the communication has broken down. This is a communication crisis. It's not a war. Where has this information flow gone awry? And the second part of it that's less normally understood or even mentioned in Western culture is how much life force is in the person, how much animating life force is in the person. And I'm one of the few people I've encountered outside of those that we've taught, students or that are clients, who understand this concept of having enough force, enough energy to move that information around, to serve as a carrier signal. I'm simplifying it. I'm not giving it its due, really, but for the sake of time, let's just talk about it in that way. Do you have enough push, umph, in all these networks, these systems of communication, to deliver the signal appropriately and properly? And if you don't, then the distortion is much more likely to happen. So, where does this confusion come from in this terrain theory? What's going on in the environment inside of you? So, in a world that we live in right now that is more toxic than it's ever been in my lifetime, I'm sure of it, we have a lot of chemical stress. And often we can all come to some agreement, even the allopathic docs, of hey, chemical distress and effects are not good for you. Those cause problems. Isn't that right, Sharon? It causes problems in the body, and it can cause numerous things, including, many would agree, can help to create a situation where cancer can arise. So, what are these? Well, there's it's in the water supply, there's plastics in the soil, there's preservation in our food, there's heavy metals in our bodies from the environment, there's radiation in your walls from the electrical system all the time. Those wires, whether the lights on this room, if anything's plugged into the outlets, it doesn't really matter. The current is always on in these electrical connections within the walls of this room unless I go to my breaker box and turn it off. It's always producing EMF. And that's just in the room in this house, let alone what's coming from Elon Musk's network of satellites and all the other satellites beaming all this radiation down onto the planet. And then numerous others, towers and probably systems we're not even aware of, but we suspect are real, are projecting all kinds of EMF. So we definitely, of course, recognize that this is an influence in our bodies because it's a form of communication. It's a form of fields that are moving through back and forth our environment, and they are, of course, affecting our network of communication as well. So in Chinese medicine, though, we call all these external factors these six external evils. And these are things they would describe as wind. Your grandmother, maybe, or a great grandmother might have said, hey, cover the back of your neck when you go outside. It's really windy. I don't want you to catch a cold. There was something even within this Western culture of the understanding that, hey, there's something carried in the winds that can somehow invade the body and make you feel bad. They didn't understand how, but there was this concept, much like in the East, that a wind could invade the back of the neck, so you need to cover the back of the neck. Well, they weren't wrong because we have the bladder channels and the gallbladder channel all here in the back of the neck, and there's not a lot of tissue in the back of the neck before you get to the fascia and the muscular layer, and those meridians are particularly susceptible to wind. And also, they had things like cold and heat and dampness that could penetrate in the body and disturb the body's overall balance. These are the concepts of ancient Chinese medicine. Today, we could update the model, not that they were wrong, the Chinese, about what they identified, but something we would understand better in our culture is, hey, it's the glyphosate, you know, it's the BPAs, it's the microplastics, it's the EMF we just mentioned, it's pharmaceutical residues. All of those are causing problems and disrupting the system's normal function and information flow that then create this disharmony. And the terrain theory would say, hey, the terrain is no longer conducive for good cellular growth and cellular division. So they don't just poison the body, what I just mentioned physically, they're scrambling, yes, the biology, the biochemistry, but they're scrambling the bioenergetic network. And for any of you who think that bioenergetics is nonsense, you just are ignorant. You simply don't understand how this works. We are biochemical and we are bioenergetic. We produce an electrical field. This is a scientific fact. We produce electrical current. We are definitely a bioelectrical, bioenergetic being that has a biochemical, a biophysical manifestation. But the bioenergetic comes first. It's the scaffolding. It's the information signal being sent out from the cellular division between your mother and your father's contribution that starts to fill out the instructions, those bioenergetic instructions, into cellular division, which ultimately form you in your mother's womb. And anything that scrambles that field long after you become an adult interrupts the body's ability to read its own signals or to produce accurate signals. And when this goes on for months or years, guess what happens? Dysfunction. We have dysfunction. And so let's not forget one of the major contributors, because I see it happening all the time, and that's our food supply. And not just the supply itself, which is corrupted in so many different ways, but the choices that people make with their food. See, we don't eat food just for calories. We eat food for the energy that it supplies the body. And one of the misnomers is that somehow, unless food is eaten, plants in particular, plants must be eaten right away or to get the maximum nutritional value. Okay, I get that. I'm not denying that whatever you can extract from food, particularly plants, happens early on. Then you have those out there, the plant eater pushers are saying, well, all meat is dead, therefore it's dead flesh, therefore it has no energy. That is a lie, an absolute propaganda filled lie. All potential food has a certain degree of life force in it, but over time, as it does degrade, then you end up having a lessening of the energy kept in the food until eventually it may have calories in it, but it is then what's called wrecked food. It means it has no life left in it. Even if it isn't technically spoiled, it doesn't have life left in it for you to assimilate. So it's not usable. It's empty calories, truly. So most of the modern food supply has been stripped of this, of the chi, of the energy. Processed food is food with no life in it. And not only does it not have life, no life, it's wrecked, it's then full of chemicals. So energetically, it has nothing to give you, all right? Nothing at all. And then it has synthetic flavors, artificial textures, but again, none of that supplies energy. It's dead food with toxicity. So in Chinese medicine, we in particular pick out the spleen as a major system for digestion. I'm not taking the stomach, the first involvement after the mouth, of course, for your digestion, but the spleen's a particularly important factor in this conversation around cancer. And it's very, very important because it is not just physically doing a job, but it's energetically doing a job with all the information we take in. Now, why did I choose to use the word information and not just food? I'm talking about food, right? Yes. But I want to also let you understand that there is information taken in to digest in all of your senses. And since we live in an age where this device right here is the major device we interact with, we have a constant flow of information coming in all the time, depending on how often you're interacting with this device, let alone your laptop, let alone your television set. You are interacting and taking in information all the time if you choose to interact to that level. And your digestive system has to break that down and assimilate that. And the poor spleen is overwhelmed because it's supposed to take the food, the information we take in, and transform it into energy and ultimately blood. But when we overload it with sugar and refined oils and just wrecked empty food, it can't do that. It can't keep up with that type of toxic intake, let alone not having any real value to feed everything. So it's trying to sort through, right, Tony? Try to sort through all the garbage to try to transform and transport what's usable to the rest of the body. And when there's very little of it, you have truly empty calories that are now causing a problem in the spleen that we called phlegm. Not just coughing up a loogie phlegm. We're talking about overall, yes, mucus, but it means something even more than that in the Chinese medical paradigm. Phlegm is much, much deeper than just mucus. It is any thick, sticky, undigested substance that gets stuck in the body. Anything that gets stuck. Because the spleen's supposed to be breaking all this information, these food particles, if you will, down further and further and further, and then transporting it. But if it gets stuck in that transformation process, then that sticky, gooey mucus, physically speaking and energetically speaking, sticky substance gets stuck in different places. Who amongst you have fatty tumors, lipomas? Usually those are harmless, but they can sometimes be unsightly or even uncomfortable. That is a form of obvious phlegm that's stuck. It just happens to be a lipid, right? It's a fatty substance in this particular scenario. But a lot of people have those, and again, they're usually not dangerous, but they can sometimes be uncomfortable and unsightly. So we're talking about any undigested substance, including your emotions. Okay? It doesn't matter. Emotions, energetic, physical. If it's not getting digested and broken down and it's stuck and it's phlegmy, it can then become even a literal tumor in the body. Okay? It can be brain fog. It can present as a cyst, like I just mentioned, or even an idea or an emotion you've never digested. Now, I don't want to leave two other very important organ systems in this whole idea and put it all in the spleen because it's not. just about the spleen. Tony says, I ate dirt when I was a kid. Now I have an iron gut and immune to most BS. Yes, well, that's a different type of information and a sorting process, isn't it, Tony? But let's talk about the liver for a second, because the liver truly is that first line of taking toxicity and trying to break it down and do something with it. And when it gets stuck in the spleen, or the liver, excuse me, then we have a double stuck issue, and that's called liver energy or liver chi stagnation. And that is the beginning of many different problems in the body, which then, of course, doesn't help the spleen out one bit and increases the likelihood of the spleen gumming up. Now, that doesn't mean just, oh, I drank too much alcohol, I smoked too much weed, I ate too much fatty, whatever the food was. This is also and often about the emotions that we have going on that we do not process. And I've had people on certain forums I've been a part of when I've mentioned the idea of one of the variables that can create cancer is emotions. What are you talking about? Emotions causing cancer. That's an idiotic statement if I've ever heard one. And I'm like, well, that shows how much of an idiot you are, because your emotions are not just ideas. This is an energy, a signal distorting variable in your nervous system if it isn't dealt with. Otherwise, why don't we just laugh at people who have PTSD from war? Hey, shake it off, buddy. No big deal. It's just a feeling. It certainly can be affecting you. Oh, wait a minute. Some of those people who would mock me for saying that emotions affect you in your state of cancer would suddenly recognize PTSD as real, though. Well, why would you accept one and not the other? They both deal with a shock to the nervous system and unprocessed emotions. It's the same principle. It's just in the case of PTSD, it's more widely accepted because we've spoken about it and given it a nice little label and a connection to emotions and trauma and an impact of an event. Cancer is no different. So, for all of you who think that this is a crazy concept, wake up. You already believe it. You just haven't applied it to this context of cancer. So, in the liver, we have what? Unprocessed anger, especially, but often frustration, irritation. Those are the major ones that are normally associated with liver. The lungs, let's look at the lungs for a second. What do they hang on to? Sadness, grief, unspoken sadness. It's stuck. The spleen, to get back to the spleen for a second, it holds worry, overthinking, rumination, self-doubt. We get into the kidneys, which are a huge factor in the world of cancer in your body. And this is basically an organ system that can create willpower, but on the other side of that coin is fear, shock. Shock affects the spleen. So the organ systems are very much impacted by events in your life that are shocking and also carry strong emotional charge. That's why processing, assimilating your emotions are important. There isn't a bad emotion. In my world, there's no such thing as a negative emotion. It's how long does it linger in the body, in the organ systems, until it starts to affect the organ systems. That's an issue. The state of elation or ecstatic feelings could even go on too long and harm you. I thought that was good. It is in short doses, but anything in excess, including your emotions, can cause dysfunction. So, this idea of emotions, this idea of food, this idea of environmental factors, your internal environment on what you think and what you feel and how fluidly the emotions pass through you, all of this end up creating potentially, what did we talk about a minute ago? Phlegm. Any physical manifestation of any kind of tumor or growth is ultimately a physical manifestation of the energetic structure and presence of long-lasting phlegm, stuckness. Okay? So once we understand that, then the question is, well, how is this exactly causing a problem in my body? I understand, Keith. How does that happen? And let's go back a couple of notches to before it becomes something physical. What went wrong in this central nervous system? There's the brain, right? Here's the brain, and we have the nervous system running down the center of the body. If I can run my finger straight down this doll, we have that central nervous system and all the organ systems that are innervated off of the central nervous system. Everything receives innervation. I'm not even including all the meridians. We're not even talking about meridians, which all have affiliation to organ systems. I'm speaking just strictly about the central nervous system. Nobody out there is going to look at what I'm saying right now and go, well, the nervous system doesn't exist. They might do that to meridians, but you can't say that about the central nervous system. Everybody understands that that's a thing. And if you deny that, I don't know what hole you've been living in and what rock you've been living under. So let's just talk about a particular doctor, Dr. Tom Tam of Chinese medicine out of Boston, and a particular system that he created, which says that cancer comes about due to the grand central station of information processing, the gray matter, the brain, and the signals that are moving back and forth between the brain and all the organ systems I talked about off the central nervous system. And somewhere in this relay system is a distortion of the clean signal that should be happening back and forth. It becomes distorted, whether that's happening in the brain itself, maybe in the brain stem, which is like a grand central station, like a train yard where all the cars and the engines come in and they switch tracks and information flow and directions are changing. That's what's happening back here. Let's say that there's an energetic stuckness taking place there, or anywhere along the central nervous system, according to what organ systems are there in that area. If there's an occlusion, a stuckness, then the signal becomes distorted. And so by the time the signal reaches the organ systems from the brain, the signal isn't clean anymore. It's not giving a clean, clear transmission of information. Therefore, the cellular division goes, wait a minute, what's going on here? We're not sure exactly what we're doing. The environment has shifted wherever that is in the body, and we need to alter how we're presenting to adapt to this new environment. So it's a distorted signal, the environment is different, and the cells go, we're going to have to adapt to the information that we are receiving, which could mean what? Tumor growth. Could mean that. Doesn't always mean that. For instance, if you have at thoracic 9 and 10, a blockage, then what you end up having is a potential for distortion going to the liver and the stomach. To the right side, it would be the liver. To the left side would be the stomach. And if they're receiving distorted signals long enough, and many other variables are, of course, in this package of whether this presents physically or not, but let's just say that in this particular person, all the unfortunate variables are present, then the liver, let's say, has that distorted signal long enough that the liver starts to develop dysfunction. That could present in a lot of different ways, but it could present as liver cancer, or go the other direction off of thoracic 9 and 10 intervertebral space, and it could be affecting the stomach, and suddenly you have stomach cancer. Now, in Tom Tam's world of diagnosis and treatment, the solution is to open up the signal and make sure this relay is clean all the way from the brain, all the way down the central nervous system. And that then would give the cells in that particular area that have been distorted a chance to get a clean signal and make the necessary corrections so they're no longer a cancerous cell. They're then creating, there's a death cell cycle like it's supposed to be, and then there's new growth of cells that are appropriate, that are healthy and in harmony. That is Tom's method. Now, Tom's method can be very miraculous in the rate of the decrease of tumor size. To give him absolute props for recognizing this and having a great outcome. However, practitioners of strictly Tom Tam system have noticed that often, if you don't go deeper than this, then the tumors can often come back. So it's a quick way to get recovery happening, but you need to work more deeply into the underpinnings of why all that distortion took place to begin with in order to keep it from coming back. Maureen says, we are generally ignorant to all the vast poisoning of our body, mind, and spirit since cradle to grave. The frustration most of us are experiencing due to the events in our nation is being amplified 24/7. Distortions are daily doses within and without, and effective leadership is meant to mitigate crisis, not exacerbate them. Our leadership has aided the confidence of criminals and their accomplices. Yes, and our dependency on the leaders is what's also causing problems. Wake up, everybody, and become accountable. They should be accountable, that's true, but if we keep making the leaders the scapegoat, that takes the accountability off of the individual. And in this case, it's got to be on us. Otherwise, we're just victims to those that might be overlords. So we have to do something besides go, well, it's a leadership's problem. Okay, yes, absolutely criminals. Sure, I'll give you that. But if we don't start going, this is my responsibility, and if I have a cancer diagnosis, this is my cancer. This is my dysfunction. So I can do something about it. Otherwise, we're just lazy and we're just trying to slough off our responsibility to other things. It's not your state leadership, it's not your federal leadership, it's not your doctor's fault, it's not the grocery store's fault. It's your responsibility, it's my responsibility. And that's what I'm trying to get at right here. This is about us and what we do, what choices that we make. And to go deeper on this, besides Dr. Tom Tam's very effective system and a great understanding of how the central nervous system is contributing to health or dysfunction, we have to go deeper because ultimately we have to realize that we are ultimately light. That's what we are. We are light that then presents as a particular blueprint, a pattern, as I mentioned earlier, that's coming from the coming together of the sperm and the egg, and boom, there's that big explosion of light, and then the cellular division is happening according to this blueprint of light that's configured in a certain way. And so cancer within this model is a distortion of light. Every cell in your body, if all things are working appropriately, properly, they know what to do because they're following a signal or a group of signals. And that signal is bioelectric, a blueprint that originates from what we might even call our soul. It is a beautiful, some would argue, an eternal blueprint that you just happen to have a certain copy of that, a certain manifestation of that, that makes up who you are. Do you come in with particular tendencies, aptitude? Yes. Yes. Caroline says that's why cancer is seen as black. Yes, it is a distortion of light and a dampening of that light. And so what you come into this world with can be unforgiving and sometimes very unfair, meaning you come into this world with an inheritance from your parents, and that's that sperm and egg coming together. There's a inheritance of a lot of tendencies, a lot of potential pathways of dysfunction that you have to work with. Well, those are called your genetics, your DNA. Yes, and you're all probably familiar with the word epigenetics, which says the way you live depends on how those tendencies, that DNA expresses. So these are choices that we make to then figure out what's going to express and not express accurately. So that light ultimately is our responsibility. And so when these fields of light are emanating and they are therefore birthing healthy cell function that know how to divide and they know how to do their job and become what they're supposed to become, then the field stays emanating a beautiful signal. If there's corruption of that signal through a biochemical influence or a bioenergetic influence, then you can have distortion if you're not resilient. And some of us come to this life with a lot of resilience built in, and others come in with very little resilience. And that's the unfair part of it. But you have to work with what you've been given in this life. And we see this, not to get way off topic, but we see this in our culture, at least in the West right now, where we're in some generations in particular are susceptible to believing that they've come in a way that was wrong, and therefore they're going to deny the state they're in and not deal with what they've been given and act like it can be altered because they just think that it should be different. Or maybe they take some pharmaceuticals, some hormones, have some surgery done, and suddenly they've corrected this very incorrect presentation that is their body and how they are. That is denial of and lack of acceptance of what you've come in with. You have to accept that first in order to then go, okay, well, how do I make the most of this? I may not love exactly the presentation, but it's what I've been given in this particular life. Now let's maximize that. That's acceptance. And so with that comes accountability. So how are you going to have a healthy mental and emotional life? And I hate to use these terms of differentiation because ultimately I don't think they're clean like that at all. But for the sake of conversation, I'm using those words. And then how are you going to make the proper decisions on what goes in your face and how you move this body in order to have the best, healthiest presentation? Cancer doesn't just happen. You don't have, well, there's John over there. I used to watch John go out and he took a walk every day, ran a couple of miles every day, and John was a picture of health. And then one day, well, he just got cancer. Nope, that is not how John got cancer. The energetic distortion was first, which then over time led to a particular distortion, which then led to organ confusion into what it was of how it was supposed to be presenting. And then you have cellular malignancy, distortion in how it's presenting, and then you have a tumor growth, and then you have cancer. That's how it happens. Now, for some, it happens much quicker than it used to. Record time, if you've heard of turbo cancer, I think you all know what's behind a lot of that. And I'm not saying it's just one factor, but we've had a lot more turbo cancer in the last few years than we've ever had before, from my understanding. You know why that is. And if you don't, go ask somebody who's in the know. Somebody will know around you why that's probably the case. But it's basically a lack of coherence in the body. And you have to ask the question, what has disrupted the coherence? Why is there this distortion inside of me? And what do I do? And I'll give you some examples of what to do. I am a fan of the idea of staying in closer to ketosis than not. I think ketosis is a difficult state to be in and also have a bunch of cancer growth. I'm not saying it's impossible, because it's not impossible, but it does seem to help a lot of people to not feed their dysfunction, these terrain issues, with a bunch of carbohydrates, especially simple carbohydrates. If you want to argue for, well, whole foods, then yes, whole foods that are not laden with pesticides are always a better option than garbage. Whether that's plant or animal, you're better to eat an organic, truly organic whole food diet. No doubt about it, that's better. I would suggest that removing the simple carbohydrates more than not would be a step in the right direction as well. So it isn't just about eating whole foods, but it's even like, well, how I can eat a bunch of fruit, right? Actually, no, you can't eat a bunch of fruit, because ultimately that is broken down as sugar. It does raise the blood sugar. It does raise the insulin levels to match the blood sugar, to offset the blood sugar spike. And then you have a rise in inflammation. And we all know that inflammation is the bedrock for a lot of illness, including cancer. So ketosis. Then I would say, well, hey, maybe you should also thinking about going beyond what's typical of what we think of as a healthy lifestyle and start doing special exercises diligently every day that will help you to cultivate more of this animating life force in your body. And there are very specific exercises. They're not hard, but they take your commitment daily to do them, to basically open these life gates inside of you to allow more life to flow in your body beyond the food source, beyond the clean water, beyond the good sleep, beyond a good type of exercise for you and amount. It's beyond what you normally think of as good, healthy living. And it's not something we're familiar with in the West, but I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And for the handful of people, and unfortunately, I have to say, the handful of people over the years who've listened to me about these simple exercises and have done them to the proper amount for what situation they're in, especially if it's a cancer diagnosis, there's a handful that listened to me and they did it and they're alive to talk about it. Because with all that life force, the distortion starts to go away. It corrects, and the terrain is different, and the cells go, wait a minute. We don't have to adapt to dysfunction. We're going to adapt to a healthy, vibrant life animating force inside of us so we can now express in the way that we're supposed to, which does not include tumors, does not include cancer. And if you'll just simply do that and correct the other things that we talked about, you have a great chance of overcoming a cancer diagnosis and living a long life, especially if you dig deep into why the distortion took place. If that's something that's easily pointed out, like, well, gosh, you ate a horrible diet for years. There you go. But it's rarely ever that simple. There's often emotional factors as well that we need to look at that are stuck for all the reasons I mentioned earlier that can cause a problem of phlegm and then a presentation of tumors of some kind. You have to deal with that as well. That's why there are some people who seemingly do all the right things. They eat the right way. They're exercising. They're taking supplements. They're even going to special health clinics and doing infusions and all kinds of things that would generally be above and beyond what the typical person would consider to be healthy living. And yet they can still get a cancer diagnosis. Well, see, Keith, right there, it's genetics. That's it, dude. Those people were doomed from the get go. Their genes just dictated the outcome. Did it? You can live that healthy lifestyle I just mentioned and hold a horrible grudge against somebody, and anger just rolls up in on itself and just builds up inside of you till the liver is totally stuck. The energy is not moving like it should, and the liver disseminates information and energy to all the other organ systems. And suddenly it's not doing that anymore. Do you think that might cause a problem within your body? Do you think that would be enough to cause a cancer growth to happen? I'm telling you, yes, it would. So it's why it's saying, oh, it's parasites, or it's just this, oh, it's the 5G towers, Keith. That's the problem. Well, it could be a contributing factor, but unfortunately, it isn't that simple. As I said in the very beginning, to come full circle, this is a multivariable situation for most people with this diagnosis. That's why throwing chemo at it, or radiation, or vitamin C therapy, or taking whatever anti-parasitic and saying, well, this is what's going to do it. It probably won't, and it certainly won't do it in a deep fashion. So if any of this hopefully has landed for you, maybe you'll look at cancer differently. At least if you take nothing else away from this monologue, take this away. You, with a cancer diagnosis, are still dealing with you. It is not a war. It's not about an invader. These are your cells that have had to adapt to an environment that is no longer healthy, and your main job is to figure out, why is the environment, the terrain, not healthy, and why did my cells adapt in this way? That's the ultimate question. And then the answer is, what do I do to bring the health back to the terrain? That's it. This is the whole Q&A right there that you have within yourself. And then you talk to somebody like me and say, what, you got my attention. What can I do to really get on a path of correcting my harmony in my body, the terrain health? What do I do about this? And then we can work out a plan of action for you to take to start turning it around. I will tell you this, though. I do not work with people, at least not very long if I do at all. I will not work with you if you don't agree to do that life-building exercise every day. Because I alone, even if I got the tumors to go away, you're doing nothing on your end to change the environment from that point forward to keep your health momentum going. You have to do something different yourself. Well, what about the diet? What if I just correct my diet or take these certain supplements? Isn't that enough? I mean, it's sort of an activity. You're changing what you're putting in your mouth and what you're choosing to buy at the grocery store and what pills you're popping. Okay, that's sort of you acting on being accountable. But I'm talking about doing something that's a little more involved. It's not hard. A child can learn to do it and have. You do it every day to bring in this life force. I know that variable is hard for a lot of you. I even have some of you shake your head at me. Oh, yeah, Keith, I hear you. Life force, life force. And I feel you. I'm like, but you're not doing it. And some of you still haven't even learned. And then I hear you complain about your health, maybe not cancer, but I'm sick and I don't know why I have this going on and this going on. I'm like, well, the life force thing, the foundational piece I keep talking about, have you addressed that yet? Well, I'm like, ... Why not? I mean, what are you waiting for? It doesn't get easier as you get older. It gets harder. So why not change that health momentum now and move it in the right direction and gain that momentum so you live longer and have a healthier experience, a better experience in your life. I'm not going to guarantee you a pain-free life if you do what I tell you to do. But I'll tell you what, when we're talking about cancer, that is one area you can absolutely shift. Massively change. It is in your ability to do so. You just have to take the effort and understand what to do and be diligent with that effort. I hope this was educational, efficacious, and if you have any questions, you can see right there, I've had it the entire time, my website there is keithcoley.com, but you can also go ahead and you can email me at keithcoley, there's my name, at gmail.com. I will try my best to look for that way. If you're on Facebook and you want to do that through Messenger, you can. If I don't get back to you, maybe because it threw your message in the trash bin or the sequestered bin because we're not friends on Facebook, just know that. If you're like, he hasn't got back with me on Messenger. If we're not friends on Facebook, it doesn't automatically put it in front of my face. So friend me first, and then our messages will be going back and forth. So really, Messenger's probably tops for communication with me. I'll see it immediately for friends. But two, email. I try to be more diligent about that. And also there's my website there. Thank you all for watching this, and I hope I can help you if you have any need for my assistance.